Okay, so I did my project on the Amorphophallus titanum plant, which I'm going to try to keep this in 5 minutes, but there's a lot of information. So the Amorphophallus titanum is known as the corpse flower, which gets its name from its putrid smell, and it can be viewed all across the world in different botanic gardens. This one is from the Denver Botanic Gardens in August of 2015. Its name is Stinky. That's taken by my dad. Anyways, so the corpse flower grows in Western Sumatra, Indonesia. It is also now known as going extinct. It's an endangered plant species because of deforestation, poaching, plantations, logging, all that type of thing. And so there's probably about an estimation of less than 1,000 individual plants remaining in the wild. So that's why they're grown in a lot of botanic gardens. So it's classified as the Titanarum, which is then in the genus family of Amorphophallus. Translates to the giant deformed phallus. Some unique features, which we'll get into a little bit later, but the corpse flower does not have a regular bloom cycle. Its stem is a modified stem called the corm, and it can grow up to anywhere from 12 feet to 15 feet in its natural habitat. There's 2 unique stages of the plant, the leaf stage and the flowering stage, which a lot of people don't know. So this is going to be pretty cool. But the modified leaf, it also has a modified leaf called the spathe. A lot of its reproduction takes place during the flowering stage, which we'll go over, but it reproduces asexually and sexually and involves the spathe, spadex, pollen-producing male flowers, and pollen-receiving female flowers. So these are the 2 stages of the corpse flower. It's got the leaf stage and the flower stage. It starts as a corm, which is that modified stem that we talked about, and then it grows into a bud, which when it grows into the bud, you don't really know what it's going to do. But after the bud, it decides whether it wants to be a leaf or a flower, and it's going to grow usually first as a leaf. So it'll go through its big leaf stage, and it looks like a giant tree, but it's a leaf, and it can grow up to at least 15 feet tall. So then this will be fully developed after 4 weeks, and then it'll die back down and after like 12 to 18 months and go back into a dormant corm. It'll stay dormant for about 6 months, and then it'll either repeat this stage like 12 more times or it'll grow into a flower. So that's what's so unique about the corpse flower is its blooming cycle actually takes anywhere from 2 years to a decade. We have absolutely no idea when it'll bloom. It just does its thing. It goes through the leaf stage and builds up all of this energy and then eventually goes into the flower stage that we know and love today. So the leaf stage looks like a giant tree. Basically just a stage where it's going to gather all of the sunlight and turn it into sugars, store energy to create the flower. So it's going to go through this leaf stage several times before it creates that inflorescence. The flower stage, which we know and love, the flower stage is the most recognized stage, and it can take several years before it happens, but after the first bloom happens, it can bloom. It's likely that it'll bloom more frequently, and then it'll bloom and it'll go through these stages for about 30 to 40 years before that corm will actually die off. And in the flower stage, let's go back to this slide over here. In the flower stage, it'll actually bloom. It blooms for about 2 to 3 days, and then it dies down and it bears fruit. And then that fruit will stay there for about 6 to 12 months. It'll mature, and then the fruit will die off, and then it'll go dormant again. The fruit you cannot eat. It is poisonous. So during the flower stage, it reproduces mostly. During the leaf stage, it can reproduce asexually. I forgot to mention, that's basically where the corm will grow really large and then split. But during the flowering stage, it reproduces using the spathe, the spadex, the male and female flowers inside. The spathe is that modified leaf, and it looks, a lot of people say it looks like rotting flesh or steak. And then when it opens up, it first releases a nice jasmine smell. And then that quickly fades from this spadex, which is the spike in the middle, and that holds the male and female flowers. That spadix actually releases over 30 chemicals to create that awful rotting flesh smell that travels for about a mile. And that smell actually attracts insects to help it pollinate and reproduce sexually. So these are the reproductive organs. Got the male organs on the left here that looks like corn, and that's the pollen producer. And then the female organ is this long thingy. That's the pollen receiver. So we talked about asexually, the corm grows large and then it splits. This causes a genetically identical plant, which does not create a lot of genetic variance, so it really limits the species that can grow. So we don't really want it to produce asexually all the time, but that's what those corms are, what are sent out to the botanic garden. So I guess it's a good thing sometimes. But it also produces sexually when it self-pollinates. As you saw here, those male and female organs are really close to each other, so the likely chance of it catching that pollen is very high. And then also the insects that carry it back and forth. So human significance in the corpse flowers. The corpse flower was discovered by an Italian botanist and explorer in 1878, and then in 1889 it was first cultivated in the Botanic Gardens, the Royal Botanic Gardens. And then in 1937, the New York Botanic Gardens hosted their first bloom, and it was so popular that they actually named the corpse flower their official flower. But that only held up until about 2006. And then as of recent, in 2018, the IUCN decided that the plant was going endangered. That's when they realized that there was only about 1,000 plants left in the wild due to all of that, those other factors, deforestation, logging, all that awful stuff. So then the Chicago Botanic Gardens decided they want to conserve this plant, and they decided to make a plan. Basically, that plan was known, I believe the acronym is TREE, but I don't remember what each thing was. But basically, they grow these corpse flowers in botanic gardens, but because of its really unpredictable blooming cycle, it's really rare for two flowers to bloom at the exact same time in the exact same place. So because of this, they weren't reproducing sexually, and they were only getting that identical corm, which was really limiting its species, so it was dying down in population. So what they did was basically when a corpse flower bloomed, they cut a hole in the base, they took a paintbrush and they took the pollen off of the male organ, they froze it, and then waited for the next flower to bloom. When the next flower blooms, they took that pollen and introduced it into that flower. We talked about earlier how the flower produces fruit. Well, the main concern with doing this pollination was that the plant would then focus all of its energy into its fruit and its seeds instead of it going into the leaf stage and then going into the flower stage. So to bloom, it needs a lot of energy. And when we do this, it shifts that energy to the seeds instead, and it will make the corm eventually die. So there's risks to this, but it's still good in keeping the corpse flower alive, hopefully. Some scientists are for it, some are not. Some scientists say that the corpse flower has no significance to our planet whatsoever. It just blooms and stinks and grows, and it's really pretty. And then some scientists say, well, every plant has a purpose on this world. We just don't know what the corpse flower does yet. So, I don't know. It's pretty cool. And you can view it at basically like any botanic garden that you can find. They probably have this flower. So, yeah. That's basically all I have on the corpse flower. It's a really cool flower, and it stinks. I went and viewed it in 2015. That's what those pictures were. And, yeah, it was not the best smell. But anyways, thanks for watching, and